Hey, welcome to Will Talks, and we are so happy because we are talking to Syed Sultan Ahmed as part of our All India tour, where we're going to be talking to amazing people in the field of education, especially people who are super innovative in their approach to education. And we're really looking forward to hearing so much about the things you do because I've heard you do amazing things in the field of events, amazing things in the field of cinema, and especially film pedagogy. I mean, we're just kind of grappling with the idea of what pedagogy is, and then, here comes Sultan, who's now working on film pedagogy. And so it'll be so good to learn so much more about what you do. Sultan, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Such a pleasure to be
where
here.
You come from and everything. Yeah.
Such a pleasure to be here, Will. And I think I love the idea of what you're trying to do, especially in India, because as educators and in the education fraternity, there's so little that's being shared in the form of good practices and ideas. And I'm glad that you're doing this and very happy to be here.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, the only way we can get other people to develop and other people to do things is to be able to share our ideas. Right?
Absolutely.
And to have someone who's willing to share very openly, very candidly, I think that is that's a phenomenal resource. And, for that, we're eternally grateful to you.
So during the course of this conversation, I'm going to share a lot of my thoughts about education. And let me start off the first thing that I hate about schooling is the whole idea of how selfish we create individuals. Because all my life, right through my school and college, it is about my test, my exam, my assignment, my project, my grades, my promotion. It's all about me. And eventually, after 18, 20 years of focused learning, when this individual comes out, I need to learn to work as a team. I need to learn to collaborate. And I don't have practice for that. Yeah. So this idea of sharing, this idea of collaborating, is probably one of the biggest hurdles in our education system. And we're very proud of creating individuals who are very individualistic and who don't share. So, yeah, it's a great idea for educators like us and you to share our thoughts and what we think about learning.
I think the way you said it is perfect because if you collaborate in school, that's called cheating and copying.
Right. How I wish we got away with that myth. There are multiple ways of actually having exams. I mean, why should one child do one question paper? Why can't four kids sit together and answer the same question paper and all the four of them get the same grades? Because that's exactly what we do in life. Yeah. Like when we're putting this podcast together, it's not just one person, right? Exactly. So there's a whole team that's putting it together. Yeah. And a well-made podcast is a result for all of us. It's not for me alone.
Yeah.
Right? So, absolutely.
So I'm glad you told me what you hate about the school system.
And I'm going to tell you a lot more as I'm going forward.
It's so important because that's, all that emotional thing starts coming out. But what I want to understand is what are you doing about it? That would be so cool to know.
So very early in my life, Will, I realized, and thankfully I've had a lot of phenomenally good mentors who've shaped the way I think about education. I think about running organizations. I started working in schools when I was in college. So as a college student, I was a very good debater. And I used to just go and win all kinds of debates. And as an engineering student, defeating and beating lawyers and, like NLS is a part of Bangalore and beating the NLS kids on a debate was like a high. One of the school principals was a judge in one of the competitions. And she said that, would you want to come and teach my students? And Pat came my answer, would you pay me for it? And she said yes. So that's how I started working in schools. So to cut the long story short, I think in a matter of few months, those kids, which was a very average school of Bangalore those days, turned out to be the best debating kids in Bangalore in a matter of a few months. Wow. And I just realized that I enjoyed doing it. I was getting paid for it. And one school became several schools. Public speaking became communication, added team building and communication skills and interpersonal skills, which is how it became life skills. And coincidentally, Will, clearly, I've probably been the first person to introduce life skills as a part of the school curriculum in this country. I started a life skills workshops in schools in 2000.
Wow, that's like
10
22.
Years. 10 years before CBSE realized what life skills was.
Amazing, amazing. So, I mean, to me, it looks like you've started right from the classroom, right? And I also feel one of the most powerful things about your personal life experience is the fact that while you were a student, you had to take on the responsibility of being a teacher as well.
Right.
And I think that is so amazing and so powerful. The reason is because you probably found it easier to communicate. You
Right.
found it easier to relate. You found it easier to give examples that people could actually, relate to and understand from. How did that shape your thinking moving forward? Because, from what I know about you, you're an entrepreneur right from the start. You
Yes,
never worked
never
anywhere,
worked for anyone.
and you've been able to craft out, a beautiful mission and purpose for yourself. And tell us more about what you did after that. And
So the whole idea of now, when I look back, I'm going to sound very strategic with the way I've run my business.
in retrospect, everything looks strategic.
It looks very strategic because it's worked out. Nothing succeeds like success. But one very important aspect of my life was when I completed chemical engineering. A lot of people ask me why I studied chemical engineering. My answer is very simple. My mother wanted me to study, so I studied chemical engineering. And when I completed my education, my mother wanted me to, go and take up a job, because in Bangalore it was very cool to be working with Infosys or Biocon and any one of those companies.
The tech capital.
Yeah, and here I am saying that I want to work in schools, and this is 2000. And those days there was no industry called education. EdTech was not a word that was heard of. And those days the only two things you could do with schools was either become a teacher or start a school. And here someone's saying, no, I don't want to be a teacher. No, I'm not starting a school, but I'm going to work in education.
Wow.
So my mother thought I lost it.
What age was that?
I was 20.
Wow.
Right? And my mother thought I lost it, so she sent me to a counselor.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Thankfully, he was a good counselor. He ended up counseling my mom. And so my mother decided to give me a year.
Wow.
So the deal was that if I'm going to make as much money as I would working in a big MNC, according to her, I would continue to be doing what I'm doing. So here I am, 25 years, 22 years now later, continuing to do. So my life's journey of work has been quite consistent. You mentioned that I was very close to students, and I think that is what drives me. So my ears and eyes are very deeply entrenched in schools with children. Even today, when I started off, I was very young and I could relate to the students. Over the years, I've learned that
You're still
I need
very
bridges.
young, by the way.
Yes, but probably the kids are many generations, ahead of me. So I've built bridges, and what I use, the people call them interns. I call them bridges. So as
Like
LXL,
bridges.
I have had this very consistent policy from the beginning of having school kids and college kids as interns, and not doing fancy stuff for getting a certificate, but they work on real challenges that we are facing.
Wow.
So the way they think, the way they respond to real life problems that we have, that my team needs to solve, is a great window for me to understand what's happening, what's trending in the schools. So that's one thing that I'm very happy that I've been able to keep my eyes and ears open even today, though I don't directly do it myself.
They say the shortest route to leadership is through responsibility.
Right.
And the fact that you give such responsibility real, not simulated, not artificial, right? Not for the sake of it,
Right.
but real responsibility to the youth. I think that is that must be such a transformational journey for them, right?
Absolutely.
And also the ideas they give you, perhaps.
And a lot of ideas that we have actually implemented. And in fact, I can talk about some of them. And I'm going to talk about two things, because what you just responded triggered two things. One about my responsibility, right? And the other one about the students themselves who worked as interns with us. What I've noticed over the years, and this I'm talking from 20 years of experience of working with young people. I'm not talking about my experience in schools. I'm talking about people in my office working with me and my team. I find the smartest students to be in school. Something happens to them by the time they go to college. They've kind of lost their mojo a little. God forbid if they've done their masters, they become dumb. And the more experienced people I find, the lesser I find them to be creative, innovative, risk-taking, energy. how I wish that we could retain that energy a school student has till they complete their education. So that's been my learning. The best ideas in this company have come from kids in school, while I have interns who've come from colleges and universities as well, the biggest ones, IIMs and the IITs, but the best ideas come from there. Now the other aspect that triggered me is my responsibility. Very early in my career, somebody asked me a question, and I don't remember who. I'm assuming it's my mother because she's the one who can ask these kind of questions. Who gave you the authority to change education?
Wow.
Right?
It's almost like a rhetorical question.
Yeah. So,
But
a
she's
lot
talking
of
to a
times,
debater, right?
here's another problem that I have with schooling education. I will talk about the problem and then come back to my mother's,
Example.
what she asked of me. In schooling, what we've learned is that the moment a question is given, we award a child for instantly coming up with an answer. And I find that to be ridiculous because life is not about coming up with an answer. Life is about living with a question. I have a question for you, and when I share that question to you, you're going to respond. Now, that's an answer you get. You live with that question, you get a deeper answer. You live with that question, you get something even more deeper. And a lot of times, we as a society are so happy accepting superficial answers. We don't live with the question. So when my mother asked me that question about who gave you the responsibility to change education, I think I still live with that question. And that's also triggered a journey in my life. While I hated college, I didn't like studying chemical engineering. While I was a decent student in school, but I was terrible in college. I was only good at extracurricular activities. So I started on a journey of what I call my personal journey of learning. And my personal journey of learning is divided into two aspects. I call it my formal learning and my informal learning. Formal learning has taken me to places like the Sloan School at MIT in Boston, or the University of Westminster, or the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I'm a trained NLP practitioner. I've done hypnosis, counseling. I'm a lay counselor. I've done multiple things which are a part of my formal learning, because whenever you get introduced in a school, especially as a chief guest, they love profiles which show these fancy organizations.
Yeah, all the titles.
So a lot of times when people read it out, it just makes me feel good. But all of these are nothing compared to my informal learning. So I've been on a conscious journey for over 20 years now to be a better person. Because when you're working with people, I think the best way to understand and add value to them is to be the better version of yourself. So I've done things which from the outside may not seem like learning, but for me, these have been life-changing experiences. I've been very active with English theatre for many, many years. So being in theatre,
like on stage theatre?
Yeah, on stage. The Bangalore has a very vibrant English theatre scene. The theatre scene in Bangalore, I think after Bombay and Pune would be Delhi. We've got a very vibrant scene, and I was a very integral part of it. I've been an RJ on radio channels. I've hosted several shows on Pogo, on Z, on several television channels.
And you call this your informal
These are my informal learnings.
Expedition.
Right. I ride, like you, Will. I know that you're an avid biker. People talk about meditation and trance. So for me, my best moments of solitude comes when I'm doing these long distance endurance rides, and I can talk to you about it till the cows come home. There are many days in my life when I've done over 1,000 kilometers in that particular day, right? And the longest journey I've done is Bangalore, Bhutan.
Bangalore, Bhutan.
Yeah, on my bike, which one way is around 5,000 kilometers, 4,800 kilometers. And there are days when you've ridden, 800, 900 kilometers. An average person after 100 kilometers, their back, hand, leg, everything's going to hurt. 400-500 kilometers, even endurance bikers after 600-700 kilometers, everything hurts. And then your mind takes over.
This is like the iron butt.
Yeah, this iron butt is 1,600 kilometers one day. When you're going to Bhutan, you're doing that every single day for 4 days. I've done those. Yeah. But this is way more intense. But what I'm saying is, those are moments when I have had, stopped my bike and made a call to say sorry to someone. I've wrote down an idea of doing the Children's Film Festival. I remember these are spots on on the highway where I've stopped because something triggered in me and said that this is what you need to do. So my biking has taught me a lot about being fit, for example. So for me today, if you ask me, my wife, my child, my work, my friends, my companies, who's my biggest priority? Myself. I'm so clear about it because I believe that if I'm unwell today or if I'm not fit, I'm troubling all my dear ones.
So many people.
So fitness for me is so critical, and that's what biking taught me. And I started being fit while I did go and work out, but I started being fit in the past 10 or 12 years because I could do endurance riding, and now it's a part of my life. Similarly, there is my biggest teacher is my travel. Just before COVID, after COVID, I've not gone to any new country while I've visited Europe. 52 countries I've traveled.
52.
Yeah, and I've taught. I've had an experience of teaching at least. So I call it an experience if I've spent at least a week in a school. I've done that in 19 countries.
Wow.
Right? And
19 different cultures, 19 different languages, 19 different probably races.
And that teaches me. And this makes me a better person, a more aware, a more informed, with wider perspectives. Because I genuinely believe one of the challenges of parents today and educators is that they have such narrowed down perspectives about education and religion and society and careers. And I can see things which many people don't because of the kind of exposure that I've had through my informal learnings and my travels.
I think I remember, as I speak to you, I remember that my father told me if you can, if you can live with silence, then you will never be alone in your life.
That's so true.
And you will always be spoken to. You will always discover new things. And that just is so powerful. And I see that in you. And I actually think maybe it is that immense, powerful essence that you have, that you've been able to discover within yourself, that that's inspiring you to do the work that you're doing. Because the work that you're doing, I'm in love with that work.
Thank you.
And I'm specifically talking about the school cinema bit because, as somebody very wise said, the heart of education is the education of the heart, right? And I see that you've been able to accomplish that kind of education, the education of the heart, at scale, and make it really accessible and affordable to so many people and so many students and so many children. You're shaping,
Right.
their worldview.
Right.
Tell us more about that. I mean, that is, I think more people, more schools, more parents, more teachers, more principals need to know about this powerful work that you're doing. For me, it's almost a social project.
It is. It is. I call it an impact business. That's what the world calls it. I am an impact business. So let me just take a step back. LXL Ideas literally means learning the X factor of life. Because very early, like I said, I realized that schools and colleges teach so much about math, science, subjects that they forget that there's a life that children have to live. We don't focus enough on them living a life. I think our entire focus is mostly on getting a livelihood. Livelihood is a part of life. Life is not a part of livelihood.
Yeah.
So my focus of work has always been around, enabling children to live a better life. 20 odd years of working with students now, the one thing that I've learned, and I'm very convinced, is that you can't teach children. But the interesting thing is that children learn. So what I can do as an educator, as a parent, as a school, is create an environment, create an experience. So my work and our work at LXL Ideas is about creating experiences for children. And I get bored of similar experiences myself. So I keep innovating and trying to think of new experience. So when I started my career, it was about training programs on life skills in schools, the traditional model, where I used to go and then a bunch of my trainers, we did this all over the country. We were at one point of time the largest life skills training company with over 100,000 children in schools physically being taught by my team. We've done that with multiple government schools as well. And on the other hand, I started doing events because thankfully I didn't learn much about chemical engineering, but I learned a hell of a lot about organizing events from my college. I was my college cultural secretary, and that came in very handy. And I think the work we did with Crayon, that's my events. That's what most of the schools in the world knows me for. Because what we did was through an event,
the Bonmita quiz contest.
the Horlicks biscuits,
Okay.
and the Spell Bee. We brought Spell Bee into India. We did the financial quest. When I say we've done large events, WizKids itself has had over 3.5 million kids who's participated over 19 years. We were the only company in India, and I think not many people have even heard something like this. We were the largest children's event in Pakistan for 5 years.
Wow.
For multiple years, we were the largest children's event in Nepal and Sri Lanka. So WizKids changed the culture of schools in India. I'm not talking about Delhi and Bombay. I'm talking about Jamshedpur and Coimbatore and Madurai and Ranchi and Bhubaneswar and, places like this which never had an inter-school culture. We taught them that a child participating in a dance competition or in a singing competition or painting is learning as much life skills as you would spend a few months teaching them in school. So it's experiential learning.
Yeah.
So that's what we did with Crayon. And one of the challenges we were facing was after a point I was getting bored running a training company because I had become a manpower consultancy almost.
Yeah.
You hire these people, train them.
Send them out.
And then you send them out, and then there are, especially in Bangalore, you have these, BPOs who were paying them double the salary and the attrition was very high. So I was looking for a medium that could teach, that could influence, that could create an experience and yet scale up. And one of the answer for this came for me is actually in one of those workshops. As a part of my informal learning, I attend a lot of workshops. Whether it is Jaggi Vasudev or Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, or, I've done many, many workshops. I've done Sufi, I've done Indian philosophy, I've done all kinds of workshops. Yeah, it's just nice to meet different kind of people, right? So in one of those workshops, I was asked a question, what's your first memory of learning? And I didn't have an answer for that. So what's the first thing that you remember that you saw or you did that you still remember? For me, it was a movie called Rocky in 1980, which was Sanjay Dutt's first movie. I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And I distinctly remember that I was with my parents watching the cinema screen. I remember the screen. I remember what I was eating. I remember the songs and the story of the movie.
Wow.
And I can still sing the songs of that movie. Not because I watched it any time later.
It's just imprinted
It just gets imprinted. And that fascinated me. That answer which I gave in that session fascinated me. And I went on this journey of trying to figure out and meeting people who done research on cinema. And I met some amazing people. And that's when I realized it's not just our fashion in this country or the food. If you look closely, you're from Kerala originally.
Yes.
Your ancestors
Yes.
are from Kerala. You have Mehndi ceremony in Kerala today thanks to Shah Rukh Khan's movie that became so popular, right? Or if you look at the hairstyles to the fashion, all of that happens. Now, this is things that we know of. Languages, the language we speak. Culture.
Food.
It can be so deep-rooted in our psyche that I'll give you a beautiful example. This is probably the best example I heard of a researcher from Calcutta. He said that Indians have a very funny way of lighting cigarettes. So when you put a cigarette in your mouth, an average Indian lights some matches and uses both the hands and does that. Whereas if ever you've seen any, Westerner, anybody who's non-Indian, not South Indian, they light their cigarette like that.
Okay.
So the story goes that in the 1930s and 40s, we had a superstar in India called Ashok Kumar, who taught a generation to smoke cigarettes because we were a beady smoking economy those days. So he didn't just teach us how to smoke, he taught us how to light a cigarette.
Cinema
And that was
shaping behavior.
It's so deeply entrenched that our father's generation did it and they had no clue why they were doing it. And our generation just follows it inside a closed room. Even today, most Indians will light a match like that.
Oh my goodness.
And that's how deep-rooted impact that cinema can have. And this journey took me through an understanding that A well-made film is a beautiful blend of storytelling, audiovisual, entertainment, and emotions. That's what cinema is. As an educator, I know I can use any one of them to teach. I can teach using audiovisual. I can teach using storytelling. I can teach by making my class very engaging and entertaining. Or I can emotionally engage my
Connect.
students, giving them examples or relating to their lives. Whereas a film brings all of them together. And that was like a wow moment. You know what? The best way to teach life skills is by making films. But that was the beginning of the biggest challenge.
What was the challenge?
We're the world's largest young population, right? So if you put all kids in India below 18 into a country, we're the world's sixth largest country. And we're the world's largest filmmaking country also. And yet, if I ask you to use your Google and tell me 10 names of films that were made well for children in the past 10 years, you'll struggle to do it. We don't
Are you serious?
We don't
as
make
a
good
nation,
content. No, we don't. We don't. It's an irony.
We don't make
We
films
don't just
for
make-
our children.
Think about this.
When I was growing up, I remember there was something like a film board for children or something like that. I mean,
Yeah, there was the Central Board for Children's Film Society of India. That is now defunct. It doesn't exist because the present government thinks that children don't need films or don't need a board that's specialized for children. That's different.
But then students don't have a voice, or children don't have a voice, or they're not important enough, is it? I mean,
Because I've been in the space, I understand this and I can quote with statistics. Whenever we use this word children's content, it's animation for children around 5, 6 and below. Now, the moment you look
Nursery
at this
rhymes
age
or-
for the 6, 7-year-olds up to the 13-year-olds, what content is made for them? The only content that's available for them is Disney-fied Disney Channel or Netflix-side Netflix, which is so similar. All the content is so similar, right? And even on those channels, it's mostly for the younger kids. While it's a different debate as to what's the quality of that content, I'm saying forget about the quality. There's not much focused content for that 6 to the 12 age group.
I don't think parents understand that. I think
They don't.
I think parents are always complaining, oh, मेरा बच्चा तो हमेशा iPad पे video देख रहा है or something. I don't think they understand.
So I think one of the reasons why YouTubers have filled that gap is because there's nothing better to do. So YouTubers are not as common for the grown-ups, the 16, 18-year-olds and above. Of course, there are some people who follow them, but they have a specific rationale that, I like cooking, so I follow cooking blogs. I like travel, so
Very
I follow.
niche.
So there's a niche. So you're not just randomly browsing through, several YouTube channels, whereas kids do that. Because the grown-ups have fantastic content that's curated for them. You've got the multiple options of OTT platforms and digital platforms where you can watch. So coming back to the 6 to 12-year-olds, that's the focus of the content that I wanted to make. But then the question was haunting me as to why don't people make? So I went on what I called my Padayatra, which I've done twice in my life so far before doing something big.
Like a walking journey.
I call it Padayatra because I just went out and met people.
Okay.
Right? So I met around 200 odd filmmakers. Wow. You name the person that probably I've met them. And the questions I asked them was, why don't we make films for kids? Do you think it's a good idea to make films for kids? And unanimously, there's not a single person who told me that they didn't want to make films for kids.
It just didn't make money.
It just didn't make money. So then when you use the word just didn't make money, that means I had to solve two problems. One, create content for children, and two, create a distribution model. And thankfully, I was not making films because I was excited or I had stars in my eyes to become a film producer or a director. I was making films because I wanted to teach.
It's the impact.
The
You
impact.
are a teacher. You started teaching.
Yeah, so school cinema, that's what it's done. It's done two things. On one hand, to cut the long story short, in these 10 years now that we've been making films, we've produced over 120 films for children.
Wow.
7 national and 480 international awards that we won.
Wow.
And we have over 500,000 kids this year watching our films in classrooms as a part of their curriculum. We've got a film on adolescent for boys. Everyone, most schools ignore this very important subject around adolescence, and
I think even parents ignore it.
Yeah.
Even parents
Especially for
are
boys.
scared, right? They have this fear of how do I approach that?
At least girls have the stay frees and the carefrees who come and talk to them about hygiene, but nothing like that happens for boys.
No.
And especially today, when there's so much exposure to the other gender. And my generation, you and I, grew up where world was black and white.
Yes.
This was right and that was wrong. There were only two genders in
No
all the
shades
forms
of
that
grey.
we filled up. Right? There was no third gender.
Yeah.
Now there's a third gender option, and these children are very aware of them, but no teacher or parent that they can talk to can clarify or give them the kind of clarity that they need. And that's a film that I'm working on now. So topics ranging from adolescence to career. I love this film that we've made called Second Best.
Second
Best. It's about this guy who spends 3-4 years trying to write his IIT entrance and doesn't qualify, which is 99.5% of Indian kids.
So many people relate.
While in every railway station and every road, we see these big boards of tech companies putting up the kids who got qualified. We
one's
don't talk
talking
about the
about the
99% who don't. And this film was about them. It's about him and getting to grips, and films around suicide for kids, taking care of people who are not well off economically, because the economic divide is the biggest challenge that this country faces. It's not the cultural and the religious divide. Let's face it. The economic divide, the rich are getting richer, the poor getting poorer. These are topics that we're taking into the classroom without being preachy. Kids love films.
And you're doing it so beautifully, because a well-made film is so powerful. Because so many of those attributes you were talking about, film is attributes of what we want a good teacher to have, right? We want her to be a storyteller. We want her to have impact, to affect, a child, That is the effect of a teacher, right? In that sense. And I think you found a model and you found a way to very beautifully use the same school, the same teachers,
Right.
the same classroom timetable, but just give much better results,
So we've done a few things right. Remember, we've worked very closely with the schools, and I genuinely empathize with people running schools and teachers working in schools. The only problem that I have is most of them have no clue how to handle their financial models.
Yeah.
Because that's one area where almost every educator or anyone running a school needs to sort it out for themselves. But
And
otherwise,
it requires creativity.
It requires creativity. Otherwise, they're doing a genuine job. And I think what's different with LXL Ideas compared to most other companies working in this space, not directly with us, in the domain that we do, but in the ed tech and the education space, is we're not looking to replace a teacher.
Yeah.
We're looking to strengthen an existing
Yes.
system. And that's what we've done with School Cinema or with the film festival, IKFF, or anything that we do with Crayon events as well.
You should tell us more about this film festival. And I know that you signed something with Saudi Arabia, with
Yes.
the Ministry of Education there. You have to tell us about that.
So there's many
because
things-
Saudi Arabia and entertainment and film and,
Right. It's a lovely story. So let me just take a step back. The work we do at LXL Ideas, which is absolutely unique to anybody else in the planet, is called film pedagogy. It's very simple. We innovated that word, and using film in the teaching learning process. So that's what we do. And under film pedagogy, today we have two. In future we'll have more. Two projects. One is School Cinema, where we're using films, well-made films by some of the best filmmakers this country has, to teach issues, life skills, values to children. That's one of the projects which we already spoke a lot about.
And it's an in-school program.
It's an in-school program which is a part of the curriculum. It's implemented by the
runs every
teachers.
week.
Yes. So it's not just a film. There are workbooks, there's learning management system activities, there are projects, assignments. So it's a complete curriculum around life skills. So our competition or the option that a school has, either teach life skills through a textbook or a workbook like you're doing, or you introduce School Cinema.
Yes.
Right. So that's School Cinema. The other one is the International Kids Film Festival. 2 or 3 reasons behind, because I've done a lot of research around that and published, research papers in international journals around film pedagogy. Every child that's going to school today is learning how to read and write.
Yes.
But you and I live in a world which is so visually active.
Yeah.
We're creating more and consuming more visual content. And I find it almost strange and bizarre that we are not teaching children visual storytelling and visual communication, and we're teaching them how to read and write. So that's the direction of what IKFF is trying to change as a vision.
This is democratizing filmmaking,
Yes.
democratizing, visual storytelling.
Right.
And getting children to do that with purity.
Absolutely. And on the other hand, someone who has not read well is not going to write well. So reading is integral to writing.
Yes.
So similarly, watching good content is integral to creating good content. But the problem with kids and kids education, like we spoke about, it's so little access to good content. So children don't have access to good content. On the other hand, because I have had the privilege of traveling to multiple countries and being a jury member to many international film festivals like South Korea and Italy and quite a few places, what I've also realized is that there are great films made for children. The problem is that children's films are like McDonald's burgers. You know, McDonald's burgers are the world's most famous and most consumed burgers because they are distributed well and marketed well.
Yeah.
Which is how children's content is. The content that you watch of Disney, Fox, or the Netflix is marketed to children. But okay,
It's the best-selling book versus
here's
the
a
best
trivia
written
question
book,
for
right?
you.
Yeah.
Here's a trivia question. Let me see if you get this.
Oh my God. Bring it on.
Which country do you think in the world creates some of the best children's content? Take a wild guess. The wilder you go with your guess, the more right you might
Can I
be.
do phone a friend? I'd have to call you. Is it Poland by any chance?
No, be more Asian.
More Asian.
Yeah.
Which country? Okay. Could it be Korea? South Korea?
Okay, I'll give you one more. You've had two wrong, so I'll give you one more opportunity.
Okay. China.
Iran.
Iran.
So some of the world's best films in the past 30, 40 years that have been made for kids are from Iran, Colombia. But definitely Iranian filmmakers are rated, won several Oscars for their films. I'm talking about Oscar-level films for their children's films that they make. So that means you didn't know it.
No.
So our kids are not watching films from Colombia, Argentina, Canada, Finland, Norway, South Africa, Australia. We're only watching stuff coming from Hollywood.
So we're restricting
the big studios.
Yeah, and we're restricting ourselves to an algorithm.
Yes.
We're restricting ourselves to a very limited worldview. And we're getting kids to look at content only that is commercially viable.
Yes.
You
and
know,
marketed to them.
For maybe the big 3, 4, 5.
So when
whatever,
people
right?
tell me that there's so little good content for children, I can only feel that pain because I know there is good content. It's just that this content is not marketed well. Now remember, anyone who's made that very sensitive film for a child made it to change.
Yes, the course of his life.
Yeah. He wanted to inspire a child, tell a story, They make it very genuinely.
It's therapeutic.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's formative.
So these filmmakers are making genuine stories, but they are not marketeers. They're not big distributors. So most of them can only showcase their films in something called as a children's film festival. And I have a big problem with the original idea of a children's film festival, while I love the idea, but it's very elitist. One, they happen in very few cities of the world. Two, even in those cities, like in India, there are 3 children's film festivals that happen. One is stopped because the government stopped doing it. There are a handful of kids that land up going there. A few thousand kids land up going there. That means the best films made for children are available in children's film festivals, and children don't go to the festival. So we came up with a simple idea. If children are not going to the festival, let's take the festival to the children. That's IKFF for you. So what we do is we believe that a school has the capability of running a film festival. They've got auditoriums, they've got children. Schools are great event managers.
I mean, I think now the principal has to really take on that responsibility and get it to kids, right?
Yes.
Because you've done all the work. You've created the content. You've
curated the content, yes.
You're curating the content. You've created content on the school cinema side. You've curated content on the
IKFF side.
Yeah, and now technology is cheap.
Yes.
Cheaper.
Much
I mean, with a mobile phone, you can make a good film.
Yes.
Right? And I think more and more school principals should just take on
Thankfully,
hosting a film
I
festival.
must admit that whenever people like us come up with very uniquely different ideas. Innovation is too small a word, I feel sometimes, right? Because everybody uses that. When you have something very different as an idea, what I've always liked is that within the fraternity of school principals, there are risk takers. There are people who are believers, who want to try something new. And they always are the ones who are leading the way of innovation, and the others will follow. So both for school cinema and IKFF. And IKFF is a huge success story, which will juxtapose into my Saudi, what happened. So in IKFF, what we did was we curated films from across the world. So in 2020, when we did it, first edition was 2017, 18, 19. We did in 2020. We had 150 films from 40 countries,
Wow.
25 languages. So children were watching films. It was like taking them to a film library and giving them exposure like what you take them to a book library. The IKFF has watch, learn, and make. So children watch good films, they get inspired, they learn filmmaking so that it's an art. Not every idiot with a camera can make a film. It's a whole different skill, right? Unfortunately, the TikTok and the Reels, Insta Reels generation will say something else for us. But you can make Reels for a few seconds. But if you want to hold an audience attention for 10, 20 minutes or an hour,
there are principles.
Right? And the third one is make. So you're encouraging children to make films. So in 2020, we had this festival happening in 14 countries simultaneously. Wow. So schools across 14 countries. And in India, we did this in 9,000 schools. Out of them, 7,000
9,000 schools.
7,000 were government schools hosting film festivals.
That's love. That,
that
is change.
So when I was speaking to the education minister of Karnataka,
how did you land up in Saudi Arabia? How does all this lead to Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. So
sorry, you were saying about the Karnataka.
So let me finish this Karnataka piece. So the education minister asked me saying that my kids study in Kannada medium. How will they understand international language? I said, children's films are beyond language, right? They're beyond culture. A well-made film, if you watch it, you don't need to understand the words, you understand what it is. And also children's films are generally made with very little dialogues. You don't have intense dialogues going on. And there is also enough research to prove that if you have subtitles written in English or Kannada, if you read that, you improve your own language skills.
Yes.
So you manage to sell it.
Subtitling.
Yes. So Saudi happened because I was speaking at an event in Saudi around 3 years ago when they launched their first cinema screen.
3 years ago.
3 years ago, they launched their first cinema screen, and then I was invited because Saudi has only one filmmaker. Because in 14 years, they had made one film.
There's one person.
Who had made one film.
Who makes one?
Who had made one film. That's it. Now I'm talking about 2019. And Ayman Jamal is a good friend, and he was there, and we were having this conversation. And in that conversation, he told me that what Saudi is doing now, they're opening up cinema screens, they're opening a film city, they're going to have film schools. He said all of that. I said, all of this is good because the more you open all of this, you're going to give a lot of money to Bollywood and Hollywood because those films are going to be making money for them. When are you going to tell your stories? When is Saudi going to tell stories from Saudi to the world? And if you want to do that, your storytellers are in school.
Yeah.
Even if you have a film school in your country, unless your culture changes, you will not get filmmakers. Because today, it's haram to watch films. It's something which is against the religion and the culture to watch films over there, and that's why it's been discouraged. So unless you make it relevant and cool. So I gave a little bit of gyan and I came back. So after almost a year around the pandemic
I'm sure you
time,
asked a few questions and this question stayed
and stayed with them. And I'm glad they reflected on it. And I came back after a year, I got a call from them saying that, can you make a project? We want to present this to the Ministry of Culture. So I made a project, which is now going to be launched in the month of October, November. The project is called 101 Film Studio. That's what they've called it. It's Saudi's first ever children's film festival.
Amazing.
So children are going to watch around 100 films from all over the world. There are 27,000 schools in Saudi Arabia. All of them will participate. It's a digital event. And not just that, we've partnered with the London Film School and curated an entire Arabic version of filmmaking for them.
Wow.
And children in Saudi will make their first ever children's films.
Their voice, their stories, their reality, their worldview.
I can only imagine if this project continues for the next 10 years, you will have young filmmakers coming out of schools and making films and telling stories. And will people like you and me can never understand what it means like to grow up in a culture without film. It was discouraged for them. It was told it is bad. And I can't even begin to tell you how happy I feel that I've managed to actually convince the world's most conservative country and their most conservative ministry, which is the Ministry of Education. Anyone who has a remote sense of idea of what Saudi Arabia is will tell you how difficult it is. And it took me 1.5 years, 2 almost, to convince them that this will work.
What an achievement.
And I'm happy to report that, they're going to be launching it next month.
This is social transformation right here. I mean, the impact of this is going to be so far-reaching. and it's just going to change the course of. I wouldn't be surprised if your name doesn't pop up in a Saudi Arabian textbook somewhere. But that's what people can do. You don't have to wait around for permission. I think you should just get out there and just make change happen.
True. And do work, do genuine things that you believe in, and do it. I use this word that the world that I live in is very mediocre. I think people are very happy with average and below average things. And they don't even realize that's average. And suddenly you have someone doing something slightly different, and then you're looked up on. So I don't think the work I do is something great. I just believe that the world I live in is so mediocre that even a little innovation just seems to stand out. And that's unfortunately the case with education, where there's so little innovation that happens. My biggest worry today, as I'm talking to you, we are now towards the end of 22. We are all going to go back to 2020. The pandemic and all the lessons that we've had of digitization, using the best of digital. It should be a blend. Of course,
yes,
complete digital is not for kids. Right? I see schools going back in time to 2020 and being happy with it.
As long as there are warriors like you, and as long as there are people who are willing to take risks, I think we just keep at it. And a lot of change is going to happen. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today, because
time flies.
Time flies. I mean, it's probably 45 minutes now, and really, as a school leader myself, I think there's just so many things I'm taking back, and I'm going to be really enthusiastically talking to everybody I know, and I'll try and take this message on. I think this is our responsibility to make change happen. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Sultan. It was amazing talking to you today.
Thank you so much.